Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Questioners on British Muslim TV with me, Mohammed Shafiq. We're broadcasting Sky Channel 752 and across social media at British Muslim TV. Wherever you are joining us, a very warm welcome. Now, we want to hear your thoughts and experiences on the stories we're featuring. You can call us now, 01924 231 083, or on the WhatsApp number on the screen now. On Sunday evening in London, Ontario, in Canada, a Muslim family, like every other family around the world, were out on a walk when a man deliberately drove into them. Police say they were targeted because of their faith. 4 of the family are dead and a 9-year-old child is now an orphan. What was their crime, you may ask? It was only being Muslim. Madhiya Salman was 44. Her husband Salman Afzal was 46. Their 15-year-old daughter Yumna Afzal and Mr. Afzal's 74-year-old mother were killed. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described it as a terrorist attack motivated by hate. Nathaniel Veltman of London, Ontario, has been charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, with a view that terrorism charges will follow. We'll go tonight live to London, Ontario in our programme to get the latest on how that community is coping with this terrorist attack. Now, as Joe Biden, the US president, has just landed in the last few moments here in the UK and ahead of the G7 gathering this weekend, members of the G7 will gather in Cornwall on Friday for the G7 summit. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will chair the summit. He has said he'll urge leaders of other wealthy countries to pledge to vaccinate the world against COVID-19 by the end of next year. He'll push leaders from the United States, France, Germany, Italy, Canada and Japan to agree to a target. But as yet, Canada and the United Kingdom have not said what vaccines they will provide for poorer countries. The summit will be the first time G7 leaders have gathered face-to-face since the start of the pandemic. The US President Joe Biden will be on his first international visit since being inaugurated in January. He just landed in the last few moments here in the UK. And Buckingham Palace have confirmed that President Joe Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden will meet the Queen for a private meeting at Windsor Castle on Sunday in her first meeting with an international leader since the death of her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Now, in other news, an activist who played a leading role in highlighting the Sheikh Jarrah expulsion of Palestinian families in East Jerusalem, Muna Al-Ghud, was arrested by Israeli forces who claimed she was involved in riots, which she denied. Events in Sheikh Jarrah led to violence across the occupied Palestinian territories, in which over 200 Palestinians were killed, including over 65 children. 12 were killed in Israel, including 2 children. Shortly, we head to Manchester to talk to a leading anti-racism campaigner, Nyla Ashraf, about the fight against racism and what now for the struggle. Nyla joins us live shortly. Then we head to London to feature the amazing story of Ali Dawson, who gave one of his organs to a work colleague and is now an NHS ambassador for organ donation. And then we finish off, as I said, in London, Ontario, to find out how the communities are feeling and coping after that terrorist attack. We'll be talking to a leading Liberal Party politician, Mohammed Hamoud, about the latest in that city and that terrorism. So we want to hear from you tonight. We are live here on British Muslim TV. You can call us now on 01924 231 083, or you can message us on British Muslim TV across social media. Send us a WhatsApp message. The number is on your screen. Tonight, the questions we're considering. Has racism grown since social media gives a platform to racists? Have you or your family considered organ donation? With another terrorist attack in Canada, has Islamophobia been normalised to the point for some Muslims are fair games? Please share your thoughts now on 01924 231 083. Let's start with our first guest. Now, Stand Up to Racism campaign group has been leading a pushback against racism for a number of years. Whether it's highlighting the injustice of the murder of George Floyd, to defeating fascism through the ballot box when Tommy Robinson stood for the Euro elections, who was humiliated with less than 3% of the vote. Now, Nyla Ashraf has been on that front line fighting and campaigning. She is a towering role model for young British Muslim women. And the key question anti-racism campaigners are asking now is, how can we defeat the language of racism, which has been normalised in everyday life? I'm pleased to say Nyla Ashraf is joining us live from the great city of Manchester. Nyla Ashraf, a very warm welcome to the programme. It's a great honour to have you here on British Muslim TV.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum everybody, and yes, thanks for having me this evening.
Firstly, how are you and your family coping during these difficult days of the pandemic?
I mean, obviously, like many families, it's difficult having to isolate, but I think people are aware of the urgency of doing so. I think it's just unfortunate that we've had such mixed messages from this government that, people are struggling to understand what the guidance is.
Yeah, often. So the inconsistencies, and you're in Greater Manchester, obviously, this new guidance that was announced yesterday by the Health Secretary. Now, stand up to racism hasn't stood still during this pandemic. You've been out campaigning, protesting, rallying. Why is that so important, even in a pandemic?
I think for us as Stand Up to Racism, we very much recognise that, yes, the pandemic is serious. It's had a major impact on all our lives, but in particular, the lives of Black people across the country, disproportionately in relation to the wider community. And for us, we see that very much because of racism and the structural racism within society. And so we see our role as being the opposition to this government. We have to be out on the streets because we can't afford to take a step back. We have to keep holding this government to account. All the figures of deaths, whether it's NHS workers or whether it's the elderly, what comes out so clearly is that the major impact it has on the Black community. And therefore, as an anti-racist organisation, we felt it was so important that we continue the fight against racism and really holding this government to account, particularly at a time when, you saw what happened with George Floyd we saw it on the TV screens, we saw it on social media. But I think for people in Britain, it wasn't just about standing in solidarity with, our sisters and brothers in America fighting on the front line. It's about recognising that the same systemic racism that allowed, somebody to be killed, a Black man to be killed in America, was the same issue that we were seeing here in Britain that allowed the disproportionate impact of Black people within our community because of COVID.
Yeah, and let's just pick up that point. What has the reaction been to your campaign during COVID? Because lots of people, obviously, from minority communities, more adversely impacted by the virus, were reluctant to come out. But you were really see the need to actually get out and protest.
So it is important to say that, yes, there is a pandemic. And at the height of the pandemic, we were very careful about what we did. And a lot of our activity was either online or when we did come out, it was very much small numbers. And even now, we're very keen to say, if you're coming out, please adhere to social distancing, face covering and all the rest of it. And what's really interesting is the majority of people that have come across what we're doing or aware of what we're doing and the campaigning that we're doing out on the streets have actually thanked us for doing that because they recognise the importance of what we do. So, yeah, I think the other thing I think it's really important to say as working class people, as campaigners, and I think as across the board as the communities that we're all based in, I think we know how to keep each other safe and ourselves safe. I think the impact of COVID, that has, it's been about people being told, yes, it's all right, you can go back to work now. It's the fact that, people on the front line haven't been given clear PPE. These are the things that have actually meant more people have disproportionately died from COVID. None of the data has shown that actually by coming out on the streets, whether it's the height of the Black Lives Matter movement or the continuing campaigning we as Stand Up to Racism are doing, has actually had an impact on those figures. So yeah, for us, it's been important to be out on the streets, and we've had a really positive response from people around us.
Yeah, and I was really honoured to be at that George Floyd memorial event last month in Manchester. What stood out for me, Nyla, was that most of the people there were white. Is that a significant change to past protests in your experience?
So we have had a really mixed group. I think the movement has been very well. It's been led by Black people quite clearly, but a huge group of, Black and white people coming out together. And that's something that we absolutely celebrate. I think the event that in particular that you're talking about has been, it was very specifically around commemorating the anniversary of George Floyd. And so therefore it was on a weeknight, which we already know that on a weeknight, we see a different group of people, a smaller group of people coming out. And so rather than having a big, event on the weekend, which we would in many cases do, it was an evening event during the week. And therefore that reflected, I think, the makeup of the people. Also, we wanted it to be representative of the different groups and also the strength of the movement. So you saw a lot of trade union activists speaking who represented huge organizations on the day. So I think it was a different type of event from what we see on the weekends where there's big demonstrations or something, mobilizations.
Yeah, well, I thought it was just really powerful to see that diversity change as well. So we see today another rise of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and bigotry. What do you put it down to?
Well, let's start with this. I think we are seeing a clear rise in racism within British society and across the board. And I think you have to point the finger at where, those that are responsible. When you've got people like Boris Johnson making some of the comments that he made prior to being elected, and then while he is in that position, his attitude towards what's happened with footballers and the fact that the level of racism that you see within that sport from fans, and then that gives confidence, I think, to the racists. And that's why you see the level of racism in society increasing. You also see the language that is used by Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, towards refugees, towards asylum seekers. I think all of that has an impact. This, let's be very honest, the government, and in particular this Tory government, are responsible for increasing what we call the hostile environment. That then gives, it filters down, doesn't it? So yes, you have to be careful of the individual, the thugs on the street, and you hold them responsible when they carry out an attack. But we have to recognise what's happening wider in society. Yeah,
I've got a really important question, and we've got about 60 seconds before the break. On every important anti-racism cause, dear sister, you're on the front line. Do you ever get tired of being on that front line and having to protest?
No. I think the really important thing to say is I might be sometimes on the front line. It looks like I'm the face of the movement, but there are thousands of people supporting this movement. And I think when you're part of a movement that is so broad and so strong, it gives you the strength to continue and to recognise the important work you're doing.
Yeah, well, you're certainly a towering figure within those communities, and being a proud Muslim woman on the front line does sometimes come with risk. But what we'll do, we'll just pause there. We'll take a break. We'll continue the important conversation with Nyla Ashraf from Stand Up to Racism in Manchester, but also take some of your calls on 01924 231 083. We'll open the line after the break. Join us after these important messages. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We've got a very important guest with us. Nyla Ashraf from Stand Up to Racism is still with us from that great city of Manchester. I'm a bit biased, Nyla, as you know, from Manchester as well, so great to have you on. Just before the break, we were talking about that, you never been tired. But as a proud Muslim woman, proud wearing a hijab, you're on the front line. That sometimes comes at risk to you and your family. Have you ever experienced, being threatened, and how do you cope with that?
Look, I think the really important thing to say is, as Muslims, and particularly Muslim women who wear their hijab, we're already at risk. So whether we choose to be involved in campaigns like myself, or whether we choose to just keep our head down and go along to our everyday business, we're a target. And therefore, for me, I think it's really important to say, well, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to speak out, because I refuse to just keep my head down and and live in fear, really. But yeah, I think we have to be very honest. Muslim women within their daily lives, all the data shows us that we are targets for the thugs and the racists. And we saw it when you think about Boris Johnson, the comments that he made around women choosing to wear the face veil, we saw a spike in attacks against Muslim women. That was a direct result of what he said, and therefore I think there's an even more urgency for us to be out campaigning and holding him and people like him to account, and other people in power like Priti Patel and her ilk.
Yeah, because that personal risk at times you face for your campaign, but you're a powerful role model, if I may say so, Nyla, an inspiration for Muslim women. What would your advice be to young women, particularly young Muslim women, about raising their voice, speaking up, and being able to do what you do?
So I would say, look, if you're interested, get involved. There are lots of organisations. I'm part of an organisation called Stand Up to Racism. It's a national organisation, and we have groups in every city, every town. We have groups in universities and schools and colleges. get in touch with your local group, contact us nationally and we can point you in the direction. Because I think one of the things that, stops us very often from speaking out is feeling like we're on our own, or other people don't share our viewpoint or our anger or our. So that's the one message I would say to young women is there are people out there who are just as interested in this work as you are. Reach out, because by working together, we're stronger. I know for a fact that I wouldn't have done some of the work that I've done or feel as confident, I think, or achieved as much as I've done if I wasn't part of an organization such as Stand Up to Racism. Because individually, our voices are not that powerful, but actually coming together, we have a far greater voice.
Yeah, and let's just go back to that George Floyd murder last year. I think it was a significant moment for the fight against racism in the United States, but it also resonated here in the UK. What's your analysis why that is?
I think there's a number of things, isn't it? So it came at a time where we were already seeing, already questioning racism within society, looking at the figures of the disproportionate impact of COVID on the Black community, looking at the fact that, stop and search is more prominent within the Black community, the impact of school exclusions on young Black kids. We were already seeing all of that. And I think it came at that pivotal moment where we were already asking questions. And therefore, I think it resonated with people in Britain. And as I said, the demonstrations we had here in Britain were huge. They were powerful. They were united. I don't think it was just about showing solidarity with what was happening in the US. It was very much about saying, actually, Britain is not innocent in this. And I think that has I think we've achieved so much. Let's be very honest. If we hadn't done what we had done over the last year, we would never have seen a police officer in America, a white police officer being found guilty of a murder of a Black man. So that's one of our major achievements. But the fact that sports players are taking the knee, footballers, let's be very honest, regardless of what their personal opinion is about certain issues, whether it's racism or whether it's Palestine or whether it's poverty, they've never been allowed to speak up. It's very much, an industry. It's a commercial. They have a contract, don't they, with their teams, and they're not able to do that. But for the first time, they're being allowed and encouraged to take the knee. The fact that BBC commentators are being asked, Black commentators are being asked how they feel. You see some of the programming that we're seeing on our television. I think it's a massive impact, whether it's education, policing, the health service. It's really opened up this space, and I think we need to grab it and really use this opportunity to enforce real change.
Yeah, and then when you look at what's happening in the football stands, England players being booed because they want to take a knee to show solidarity and reflect on the struggle against racism. What's your reaction to that?
Firstly, I want to say well done to all the footballers and the clubs that have supported the footballers in taking the knee. And I think it's an absolute disgrace that we have a Tory government who hasn't supported the footballers. The fact that the ministers, like Boris Johnson himself, hasn't come out quite clearly and said, just as the England captain has said, is yes, we stand by these footballers, that they're on the right side of history. I think it's a disgrace, actually, that we have Tory MPs across the country who have come out and attacked the footballers for doing what they're doing. But we're not surprised, are we? I mean, the Tory party itself has a proud history of being on the wrong side of history, haven't they? Was it when Mandela, we all talk about Mandela and, a great freedom fighter he was, but let's not forget it was the Tory party all those years ago who fought against his freedom, who, campaigned. I think at university they even had badges that said something like, but they should hang him. That's what they said. And yet now, we hold him up as a great statesman. So I think I'm not surprised, but it's no less, we shouldn't be any less angry about it and hold them to account. Yeah.
I'm sure the Conservative Party would argue that they've mended their ways, if you like, on the Mandela thing. They learned from history, and you saw David Cameron at Nelson Mandela's funeral there back in 2013. Now, you led the fight to stop Tommy Robinson being elected to the European Parliament in that historic election in 2019. Now, some would argue that the threat from far right has receded, but you would argue that it hasn't, and we can't become complacent. Am I right?
No, for sure. I totally agree. We can't be complacent, but I do think we should take a moment to celebrate some of our victories. And getting Tommy Robinson, making sure he didn't get elected, is definitely one of our victories. I mean, let's be honest, he decided to stand as an MEP in the Northwest firstly because he has an agenda where he could force it was all based around Islamophobia and attacking the Muslim community. But he could do that because, or thought he could do that because in the Northwest, we have some of the highest levels of poverty. And he wanted to, I think, latch onto that, people's despair around poverty and the lack of, hope for the future. And with all of that in place, bearing in mind, we're coming out of a pandemic, we're probably going to see the biggest recession in our generation, if not, even prior to that, before that. And so all of that stuff breeds fear and the far right can latch onto that. So we have to be very clear about it. And actually, let's be quite clear, the Tory party themselves and the language they use, whether it's about international aid or whether it's the attack on refugees claiming asylum, they feed the far right, I think, in Britain. And we have to be very clear about that. I think recession, poverty, desperation, all of those things have an impact. And I think it's really important that not only that we as Stand Up to Racism are out on the streets fighting against, racism and the potential for racism, but I think anti-austerity activists are out there alongside us. The trade union movement are out there holding this government to account and fighting for the welfare state, because all of these things are connected with, I think, the potential to allow the far right to grow in Britain.
Yeah, and when you look to the fight against racism in the 60s and 70s in Manchester, and then compare yourself into that struggle, what stands out during that fight in the 70s and 80s that we can learn from?
Well, I think the thing that stands out now is that we have a far bigger movement, which is far more united. It's more about black and white people coming together. And I think that's something we absolutely need to celebrate. I think also is what we're seeing right now is a different form of racism. In the 60s and the 70s, it could have been the BNP or the thugs on the streets. Today, I think we have to be very clear that the threat of racism is very different. Yes, we've still got the thugs on the street, but actually the level of racism that we get from people like the Tory party or, through the press, and in some cases, even the mainstream press, they're trying to normalize it. And I think it's really important that we hold them to account. The attack on, I think, Black Lives Matter and the idea that taking the knee is somehow, an extremist act, it is a threat to our movement. And so I think that's very different. I think the threat is coming from a different way, and it's more about cultural racism. So,
normalised racism, the language of racism, which is kind of normalised in everyday language, is somehow seems acceptable.
Yeah, and we're not talking about your skin colour now. It's about the fact that it's your faith. And it's not about you as a person because you choose your faith. So it's more about that, I think, cultural racism, which actually is similar to what we had in the past. It's just dressed up in a different way, and I don't think we should allow that to fool us.
Yeah. Tell us, what more campaigns are you involved in, and how can people find out more about Stand Up to Racism in Manchester?
So as I said, Stand Up to Racism is a national organisation. Here in Manchester, we have groups across every part of Manchester, and if you get in touch with us, we can definitely connect you with your local group. So there is, you can get on social media, you can look for Stand Up to Racism and you'll get the national link. You can also look for groups in your local area. So for instance, if you were interested in Manchester, it would be Stand Up to Racism Manchester, but we have things like Stand Up to Racism in Glasgow, Stand Up to Racism Sheffield. Across the board, there are groups that you can link up to. One of the key things that we've got coming up here in the Northwest is we're having a regional conference. So we're inviting people to come together online. So it will be a Zoom event, but it will be a collaborative, interactive event where people can talk about some of the campaigns they're involved in, what they're interested in getting involved in, and learning about other campaigns, and hopefully collectively deciding is how we take this movement forward, what we do in the Northwest, what kind of campaigns we want to be involved in, but at the same time learning from what's happening in other places. People would have seen that amazing turnout in Glasgow when the Home Office tried to deport 2 men and the local community came out in their hundreds to stop that deportation. We're going to learn about stuff like that. We'll have links with activists in the US. So, it's the 4th of July. Stay tuned and look for us online.
Well, thank you so much, Nyla Ashraf, for joining us. Let me say this to you on camera live. You're such an inspiration to so many people around the country, but particularly our young Muslim women. Wish you well, keep safe, and best wishes.
Thanks very much.
That was Nyla Ashraf from Stand Up to Racism joining us live from Manchester. Now, in the last 30 minutes, the United States President Joe Biden has landed in the United Kingdom. He's here for that G7 summit. He landed in the last 30 minutes at RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk. And this is his first overseas visit as president since he got inaugurated in January. And obviously with the pandemic, he decided to stay. He's going to be meeting US force personnel and their families at that. And then he's expected to spend about 90 minutes there before he's then going to fly to Newquay Airport. And then he's going to travel on to Tregenna Castle is where the G7 summit is. And tomorrow he'll be meeting Boris Johnson in a first face-to-face meeting. You get my drift. After the break, Ali Dawson and that fantastic story of donating your kidney to your former teacher. John is on the other side of these important messages. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, live here on British Muslim TV, wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much. Sometimes, occasionally, it would help if I put my teeth back in, get my words muddled in. But wherever you are around the world, whether you're watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever you are, a very warm welcome. We hope you're enjoying the program. But as I said, US President Joe Biden has landed in the United Kingdom for the G7 summit on Friday, and we'll talk a bit later on about his visit. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to also land here in the UK tomorrow, so we'll keep an eye on that. Now let's move on to our next story. The number of people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds who've had their lives saved with an organ transplant in 2019 is the highest it's been on record. As of the 29th of February 2020, there were 1,909 people from BME communities actively waiting for an organ transplant, the highest number for 5 years. Black, Asian, minority ethnic patients represent almost a third of those waiting for a life-saving transplant. Now, Ali Dawson is one of those amazing people who decided to be an organ donor. He donated a kidney to his former teacher, Sonia Leonardo, and he has said that the experience has been life-enriching. I'm really pleased Ali Dawson is joining us live from London. Ali Dawson, a very warm welcome to the programme. Such an honour to have you on.
Thank you. Good evening to you and all the viewers.
Thank you so much. Let's begin the story, if we may, at the beginning. Were you always someone who wanted to be an organ donor, or was it circumstances that led you to that choice?
I've always been a blood donor, but I never really thought about being an organ donor until it was kind of circumstances, and I found out about this lady in India through Facebook.
Yeah, and then this is how you learnt about Sonia's need for a kidney. What sort of things were going through your mind when you heard of her individual need?
Well, when I was training to do radiology at King's College Hospital, she was one of my mentors, and she trained me. I just remembered she was always really kind, and I just said to her, "I'll do a test for you. I'll do a blood test."
And then the blood test came positive. You were a match.
Yeah, we had blood tests, and then so many scans, ultrasounds, CT scans, and they had to check that my kidneys I was healthy and my body was going to be okay afterwards. And you even see a psychologist, and they make sure that you're compos mentis and you know what you're doing. And so it was a lot of tests.
Yeah, because that's the thing. There's lots of tests to make sure that you are kept safe, but also that Sonia is kept safe as well in that process. Did you understand the process, how difficult it might have been on all the tests that were involved? Obviously, you're in the NHS as a radiographer, so you would understand the process of organ donation.
Yeah, I understood it being a radiographer, and I was able to view my scans, and so it was quite interesting as well.
Yeah, and was that a decision that you came to easily in terms of giving up your kidney, one of your kidneys anyway?
It was kind of like my heart told me to do it, and with all the tests being positive, I thought it was fake, to be honest, as well.
Yeah, and then what was the conversation with your family and friends? Was it encouraged?
No, to be honest, being from an Iranian background, that's where I was born. I was raised here. In Iran, it's still legal to sell kidneys. So you see in the posters in the street even that say kidney for sale, like £20,000. So my family at first said, "Oh, how much money are you getting for it?" Because that's their mentality.
I thought you were crazy giving away your kidney for free.
So yeah, some of my friends even said, "Oh, what is she going to take you to give you a cruise holiday?" Or and I said, "Well, no, it's illegal. We can't really do any of that." But it was interesting to see the feedback from people.
Yeah, and then you've done all these tests. You then have a follow-up conversation with Sonia. How did that go?
She was a bit overwhelmed that everything was a match and it was going to go ahead. And she said she sometimes didn't believe I would go through with it all.
Yeah, because can I just say this to Ali? Did you realize at that time what a beautiful thing you were doing?
Thank you. I was just, yeah, I guess I didn't really think about it because I was so embroiled with the tests. And...
Yeah. Because in a sense, that understanding the process of giving up a kidney, although it's a quite as detailed as you said. Just for our viewers' sake, what's the process from beginning to end in terms of wanting to, give a kidney to somebody who might be a match?
So they put you in touch with the organ donation coordinator at the hospital, whichever hospital the other person's at. Some people can do it anonymously as well if you want to just help somebody. And then they do a whole load of tests, so blood tests, ultrasound, CT scans, MRI scans, and it's all to make sure that you're healthy and you'll be fine after donating. And for a lot of people, in my experience as well, they've found by chance that they had some sort of cancer or kidney cancer, and they were able to, just through the process, they were able to be saved. So it's quite good they do all these tests that wouldn't have otherwise be picked up.
Yeah.
And then you see the psychologist, and they make sure that you know what you're getting into, and you see a lot of consultants as well. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I just think it's a beautiful thing, and really to our viewers out there, so my nephew was in need of a kidney and was able to get one in the last 12 months, and it helped save his life. And so really passionate about this, and it was really important for us to have this conversation. What can we do to highlight this? Because I know you could have easily just given in your kidney, you've done your good deed and move on and get on with your life, but you've chosen not to do that. You've chosen to be an ambassador, to raise your voice for organ donation. What can we do to increase more BME donors to come forward?
I think the main thing is talking about it with your family, and even though now in the UK we have the opt-out system, it's really important to, we say, make them certain. So just speak about it in family gatherings and just say, hey, have you thought about organ donation? Because I know a lot of my Muslim family members were against it, but now they've seen me and they've seen that I've done it and I'm fine. They're all really pro organ donation. So it's all about getting it out there on social media and talking to your family.
Yeah, having that conversation, being clear about what it is, because obviously there are religious implications for this, and lots of scholars and people of many different faiths have come forward and said it's something that you can give. And obviously there's not a conversation with you, but...
yeah, especially a lot of imams I know have said that it's fine as well.
Yeah, well, I've certainly had conversations with a number of imams on this issue, and they've said it's totally acceptable for you to give one because you're preserving life. There's a verse in the Quran that talks about if you save one life, it's as if you saved the whole humanity. And if you can save a life by giving a kidney and you're a match, because that's the key thing here, It's just not random, is it? You have to be a match. You have to be able to help that person.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
How is your nephew doing now? Is he okay?
He's doing really well. Yeah. He's done really well. He's got a couple of more to go, but he's a couple of more procedures to go. But yeah, he's doing really well. And you know, life has been saved by people, which is the important thing here, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because some other people watching this might think that you could become more ill if you give up a kidney. How false is this?
I feel perfectly fine. I can do everything I was doing as before, and I feel even more healthier now because I'm drinking more water, and whereas before I wasn't really looking after my kidneys. So that's why they do all these tests, to make sure that you will be healthy.
Yeah, that's really important, because you will be healthy, and you're an example of that. And what's the emotional support and ability to deal with the impact on mental health after you've given your kidney? Does that stop, or is there continued support for you?
If it's needed, it can be continuous with the organ donation nurses, and there's a whole group of organ donation ambassadors with NHS Blood and Transplant, and we help with the support as well.
Yeah, and what, in simple words, would you describe your personal experience of being able to donate one of your organs?
It's been life enriching beyond anything I could describe. I think it's been one of the happiest things I've ever done. Just being able to see somebody who was suffering. Sonia was doing dialysis 3 times a day, and now to be able to see the progress and see that she's able to live a normal life and she's healthy, and that's one of the best feelings in the world, I think.
Yeah, and actually it's important for individuals to have that conversation, because there's obviously a process where you've been involved in giving an organ whilst you're alive, in this case your kidney, but there is that conversation that, you know, if you are to die, that you would want your organs to go to help save life.
Yeah, that's why it's really important to share your wishes with your family and friends, because if, God forbid, anything happens to you, they will be the first people the doctors and nurses will have to ask if they knew about your wishes. And
yeah,
so do anything without asking your family.
Yeah, because really the individual can now, we all have to opt out. Consent is presumed, I would say now, but if you wanted to opt out, but families also have a veto, don't they? So that's why it's important to have those conversations.
So it's really important to have the conversation.
Okay, my final question to you, Ali, how can we increase organ donors from BME communities?
I think by doing programs like this and trying to raise more awareness on social media, and just talking to your friends and family.
Well, I know that it's been a difficult conversation for you, because you're obviously quite nervous, but you've done a fantastic job. Thank you so much for what you did and what you're still doing, because you, as I said, you could have just got on with your life, but you're not. You're an NHS organ donation ambassador, and so you're an absolute hero, and I salute you and I wish you well.
Thank you very much.
That was Ali Dawson joining us live from London. What an inspiration, and we wish you continued health, as I said. Now, whilst, as I was saying, we're going to, after the break, have this extended coverage of what's been going on in London, Ontario. You would have seen the news that a Muslim family were killed by a terrorist in a terrorist attack because of their Muslim faith. London, Ontario is a city in the state of Ontario in Canada. And And we want to talk to a leading liberal politician, Mohammed Hammoud. You know him. He was one of my guests a few months ago. He's from that city. That city is his home. And what we want to do is explore what has happened, how that community is dealing with this trauma, because he's a leading light. And I don't know, many of you have shared this on my social media. We heard a powerful video, from Mohammed Hammoud in the immediate aftermath once that news came through yesterday. And I just want to show you Mohammed Hammoud is here with us, and we're grateful that he's joining us live from a city to reflect on what has happened and why. Mohammed Hammoud, we'll get into the program a bit later, but how is your city coping?
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Thank you for having me. We're coping. We had a great show of solidarity from people here in London, Ontario yesterday. They came together to show that when somebody decides to drive division between us, that we come together to unite in solidarity. There were, I want to guess, maybe 10,000 people. It was crowded. We, of course, tried to be aware of social distancing rules because we're still on lockdown in Ontario. But we felt that it was really important to recognize that standing in solidarity 6 feet apart, shoulder to shoulder, is more important than staying in our homes. And
this was the vigil last night. I was watching it today. You had the leaders of all the political parties there. The Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, was there. Justin Trudeau, your party leader, but the Prime Minister, Erin O'Toole, who's the, I think he's the Conservative Party leader.
The opposition, exactly.
Opposition leader, and Jagmeet Singh, who is the leader of the National Democratic Party. I hope I pronounced the names correctly. But a sense of the whole political leadership coming to your city to show solidarity. How important was that?
Incredibly important. You know, to the Muslim community, to the London community, incredibly important. There's a bittersweet feel to what has happened because, you know, we need to unite, not just when we're being
Mohammed, just stay there. I'm sorry, we're just coming close to our break. It's a couple of minutes. I just wanted to start that conversation. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll have that conversation about that terrorist attack in London, Ontario. Join us on the other side of these important messages. Welcome back to British Muslim TV with me, Mohammed Shafiq. And now, when a family in a walk are mourned down, in which 4 of them are killed, you have to ask why it happened. And what does it say about life, not just in Canada, but around the world, where Islamophobia is ignored, denied, or encouraged? We have what happened in London, Ontario. The Canadian Prime Minister summed it up in House of Commons in Ottawa on Tuesday. He said, if anyone thinks racism and hatred don't exist in this country, I want to say this. How do we explain such a violence to a child in a hospital bed? How can we look families in the eye and say Islamophobia isn't real? Mohammed Hammoud is a resident of London, Ontario. He's a politician for the Liberal Party. But more importantly, he's a father. He's from that community. He made a powerful video, as I said before the break, which has resonated with so many residents in the city, but also around the world. I'm pleased to say he's still with us. Mohammed Hammoud, thank you so much for joining us from the city of London, Ontario. First of all, I'd like to offer my condolences and prayers to your city. What's the reaction been from London, Ontario to this terrorist attack?
Thank you for your praise and your condolences. And that is what Londoners have been doing for the past 3 days, is offering their condolences to their fellow Muslims and to each other. You know, driving to the event at the mosque yesterday, it's about 8 kilometers away from my house. The streets were lined with people from all Canadians, right? Not just Muslims, all Canadians holding up signs that not on our sidewalks, not on our streets, not in our city. So there's a resounding show of support for this family who perished, 3 generations of Muslims, because they did nothing wrong but be themselves. And that's not a message that we send to anybody in our city or in our country, or shouldn't be a message that we send anywhere in the world, that you deserve to die because of the color of your skin or your creed. or the way that you live your life. So Londoners have shown up in support. My fear, my concern are the people who don't show up for whatever reason, the people who perhaps don't feel that this was such a crime, don't believe that this is terrorism, that Islamophobia shouldn't be criminalized. What are their thoughts? And the people like this man who committed the crime, there are others. I'm not asking the question, are there others? We know there are others. We saw that happen south of us when Trump came into power. People came out of the woodwork and they had a very loud voice, and their voice turned into violence. Words of hate breed actions of terror. And that's what we see with online hate. It becomes terror on the streets. And so we need to do more as a government. Our various levels of government need to do more to address this.
Yeah, I really want to get into the political sort of implications maybe a bit later on in the program, but so we've got extra time with you, and I'm really grateful for you providing that time. You know these streets of London, Ontario. You know these communities. You're from this community. Suppose the difference is that you're from this community. You live this, particularly when Manchester Arena bombing in 2017. It was my home city, so you knew it affected you a lot more. What has the reaction been? Because we saw the vigil yesterday, thousands turning out, and lots of non-Muslims turning out wanting to show solidarity.
I mentioned to you earlier, Muhammad, it's bittersweet because we Londoners and Canadians are a warm people. They will stand with you. They will feel with you. I was on an interview earlier today, and then I was on a meeting with some colleagues, and they are paying their condolences to me. And they said, what can we do? And I said, talk about it, engage. There's online hate that is proliferating. And what we can do is, engage in online love and respect and acceptance. If there's something that resonates with you online, comment, engage, share. Because just like the people who are spreading hate online are proliferating that message, we can proliferate the message of love and acceptance and tolerance. And we need to go beyond tolerance. So Londoners are showing their support. They're showing their tolerance. What I hope this helps establish is to embed in people's hearts that this is wrong, that whether you're Muslim, whether you're white, whether you're Christian, whether you're Black, no family deserves to lose their life for any reason whatsoever. Certainly not the reason for professing faith to a certain creed.
Yeah.
So Londoners understand that. But what do we do next? Where do we go? That's the bigger question. Is I appreciate that Londoners have come out in solidarity. My question is, what are we doing to continue to raise awareness? Because awareness is not a journey, it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's an ongoing conversation that you and I have to raise the awareness of other people. How are we being aware of these blind spots, these biases that allow us to come to the point where we believe, I had somebody post on my social media today, well, yeah, we want to show you support, but people came out during COVID. I respect COVID as a virus, but racism is a greater virus. So if I had to choose, I say, please support anti-racism, because we've got a vaccine for COVID, but we don't have a vaccine for racism.
And the government authorities, both provincial level, but also the federal level, had given you permission to have this vigil yesterday.
They did. I mean, they showed up. We tried really hard to respect, social distancing rules. I don't think anyone there was without a mask. We were aware. We were careful. From the leaders themselves who tried to sit several feet apart to the people who congregated. The message was really one of togetherness, and it was hard to stand apart when you wanted to be together.
Can I just ask you, what's unique about that community, London, Ontario? Because obviously London being the UK, but having a separate identity in terms of Canada, what's unique about your community?
The first mosque in Ontario, the second mosque in Canada. Muslim families that go back to the 1800s as immigrants who have helped establish the city, and they number in the thousands. Muslims who would visibly look Muslim to you because of the way that they dress or the way they behave, but also Muslims who look like you and I, like maybe they don't have the beard. So we're integrated. We're part of the community, not just in the way that we look or the way we speak. We're integrated and we're contributors to this community. We work hard in this community. The Muslim community has tried really hard to reach out and get engaged with others in the community. We role model the behavior of standing together. When there's issues that unite us, because we should be united, we stand together in solidarity with our Jewish brethren who, because of the synagogue bombing in Pittsburgh, when there was the Christchurch, they united with us. When there was the bombing in Sri Lanka, whatever world event happens, almost whatever world event happens, we unite together. Unfortunately, there are still some events that are taking place, like the conflict in the Middle East, that is probably spurning some of the anger and the angst. And I think that, can I truly say as a Muslim or as a Londoner that what is happening overseas is not impacting people who are brainwashing themselves and being brainwashed online? I can't say that it's not impacting. And if somebody's saying to me, how do you know it's impacting? What I'd say to them is, how do you know it's not? So I just want us to be very aware that the media, online and traditional media, and our television shows, and the narratives that we see in through Hollywood and through various cinematography, they portray Muslims as the other. And when you dehumanize and demonize the other, it becomes okay to run them over on a sidewalk in the city that you call home.
That's really powerful. A sense of, I was watching the vigil today back, which happened last night. They saw the political leadership come together. But a couple of the speakers did actually talk about those difficult conversations. And I really want to have that with you just after the break. I know you're going to stay with us. We've got lots of time with him. Mohammed Hamoud, my apologies. And we'll take some of your calls as well. We're going to open the lines as well after the break. 01924 231 083. Your reaction to the London, Ontario terrorist attack in Canada. Join us on the other side of these important messages. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're reflecting on the London, Ontario terrorist attack that happened on Sunday night, which a family was destroyed, and one child. And we talked the politics, and we'll discuss that with our special guest from the city of London, Ontario. But a child, a 9-year-old child, is in hospital, and he's woke up, and he now knows that his family, his dad, his mum, his sister, are no longer here in the world. And that somebody did that deliberately for no other reason apart from the fact that we're Muslim. And our special guest from the city of London, Ontario is Brother Mohammed Hamoud, who is a former parliamentary candidate. He's just been selected for the Liberal Party. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on what must be a very difficult time for your community. We were talking just before the break, during the break, should I say. In essence, Islamophobia doesn't happen in a vacuum, does it? You have Erin O'Toole, who's the Conservative Party leader. He's the leader of the opposition in the House of Commons in Canada. He voted against a motion on Islamophobia to recognise Islamophobia. Yet he was there at that vigil, meters away from you, saying he wanted to come and show solidarity. How does that make you feel?
Hopeful, because I believe that we can look through the lens of abundance and allow people the grace to change their heart set and their mindset. And all those politicians who stood before the crowd of thousands yesterday, who promised to turn their words into action and to recognize that Islamophobia is a threat to our communities, are not going to be held accountable. Each one of them wants to be voted back in. So they have a responsibility to themselves, to their parties, and to the people that they represent, and to the people that they spoke before yesterday, that they have to make sure that they follow up on the promises that they made. So were those empty promises? Politicians are known, or we're accused of making promises we don't keep. So I want to make sure as a member of this community that I will hold my elected officials accountable to follow through. I want to make sure that should I ever have the opportunity to become an elected official, that I will be that voice to amplify voices that have spoken up and said, Islamophobia is a crime. So we need to move forward. We've called for a summit. That's what the group called for yesterday. The community is calling for a national summit on Islamophobia. And I saw heads Now, I'm not going to mention names, but I looked at every political leader sitting in the front row, and they were going like this. And what I want to do is I want to look them in the eye again, even if it's a virtual eye to eye, and remind them that they were agreeing with us and they were acknowledging in front of thousands of people that Islamophobia, we need to do something about it. So you ask, how do I feel? People are allowed to change their mind, but now they have to change the words that they stood and voted for in Parliament and show people that they're willing to do things differently, do things better.
Now, I know you've agreed to take some calls as well. There'll be lots of people who might want to share their condolences with you, with your city, through you. So 01924231083 is our number. Let's go to the line. Assalamu alaikum, you're live on British Muslim TV. Hello, brother. Oh, sister. Hello.
Hello. Sorry.
Are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, brother. If you just turn your TV volume off and then we can talk to you.
just did that now.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the program. What would you like to say in reaction to what happened in Canada?
Yeah, you know, I'm glad the Prime Minister who mentioned that it was a terrorist attack, because usually they don't do that, do they? But, you know, it wasn't just...
Well, just on that, on that, in the last few moments, on the Reuters news agency are reporting that the London, Ontario police have said they're now considering laying terrorism charges against the man of accusing that family. So it's an ongoing process. Terrorist.
I mean, if you, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. See, it wasn't. I mean, how can it not be terrorist? As if the husband and wife and was it 2 kids, as if they didn't feel terror at their last moment before they left this world. And you know, it wasn't just that. I mean, let's face it, it was a racist, anti-Muslim terrorist attack. Let's call it for what it is, right? But anyway, you know, it shocks me to know that something like that would happen over there. I thought the people over there were quite mellow, much like your guests there. You know, maple syrup moves country. But then at the same time, you know, I'm not surprised, although I am shocked. But I hope this kind of thing isn't a trend. I don't know. I mean, maybe your guests there can reassure us. But look, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, just so soon after Ramadan, you know. So,
it's tough, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you so much.
All of this.
Thank you so much for your comments. Quite a few people on the lines as well, but thank you so much for that. Let's go to the next line. Assalamu alaikum, you're live on British Muslim TV.
Assalamu alaikum, yeah. Can you hear me, yeah?
Yes, we can, sister. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, I want to say that when you hear things like that, it's horrible, because it's a human life, a human family got murdered, whether it's Muslim or, you know, what faith. It's a human life that got murdered, and humans could do this. It's never stopped. They've been doing this for... Humans have murdered so many times in the world, genocide, evil. Where does it stem from? Why do they feel the urge to take a soul? Do they not realise Jesus said you don't do this? Muhammad said you don't do this? Even common sense and manners. Goodness, where is the goodness on earth? Yeah. Why would you want to murder? It's just not right.
Thank you so much.
That's the most, and you know what? It's not even. This should be a big thing everywhere just now in the media, because it should be shown they need education and psychological help. This is just evil to the max.
Thank you so much, sister, for that comment as well. But yeah, I think Mohammed Ahmed is the difficulty, because here in the UK we've got a definition of terrorism which is enshrined under anti-terror legislation here in this country. Yet in Canada, according to Michael Nesbitt, who's a University of Calgary law professor, who has said it's a rather complicated area because Canada doesn't have a definition of terrorism, and that's why it's difficult for the police to lay these charges of terrorism.
We don't, and it's not as defined as it needs to be, and it doesn't include Islamophobia. So that's why I think we have work. We can't fix something that's broken unless we know what's broken in it. We can't, you know, this virus has no vaccine, but can we do something to curb it? And that's why we need to look at the laws and legislate laws that hold people accountable, that deter people from enacting what they're seeing online or other places, and make sure that we can regulate our media so that it's not propagating hate against a particular group of people because of the way they dress or what they believe. That's important. And you know, if you bring in the whole conversation about freedom of speech doesn't say that because of the way the person looks or dresses, you have the right to mow them down while they're walking on the sidewalk. So just want to remind people that we have a lot of work to do to define what racism means. And as much as we do terrorism, I'm sorry, but as much as we do to define what inclusion means. It's a work in progress, and I think we have a lot of work.
Yeah. The victims were, according to the family members, devoted to their community. The father of the son who died, Salman Afzal, his brother, who lives in Australia, I understand, is arriving in Canada in the next few hours. They were devoted to their family, they were devoted to the community of London, Ontario, to the mosque, and their faith was very important. Is that community close?
It is. We have
you're not as large as, say, Toronto as a community.
No. You know, the numbers, some Muslims would like to believe that there are about 30,000 Muslims in London. I think more modest numbers, maybe around 12 or 15,000, right? But it's a very tight-knit group. There's several mosques. There's at least 7 mosques in the city from various walks of, various sects of Islam, but they're very coordinated. They work together, and we have a sense of community. And you saw that yesterday. No one came out to say that I'm a Shia Muslim or I'm a Sunni Muslim or I'm an Ahmadi Muslim. And in fact, the non-Muslims who came out, they came out not because they were Muslim, but because they recognized that they were human, as one of your guests was saying. And we need to stand together because this thing is a crime against humanity and not just against the community.
Yeah. As I said, we're taking some of your calls now on 01924 231 083. Your reaction to that London, Ontario terrorist attack. We saw an outpouring, if you haven't seen the vigil and the comments by the politicians in Canada. This happens, Mohammed Ahmoud, after the attack on the mosque as well, 5 years ago, was it?
In 2017, January 29, 2017, yeah. And against the mosque in Quebec City.
Quebec City, yeah. And
6 men.
Canada has been, as somebody who's British and lives in the UK, Canada was seen as a liberal place, as a place where people can practice their faith and contribute and live their life. How are people feeling about, because this could happen to anybody walking with their family on the streets. I walked my kids this morning to school because the weather was nice, and I just couldn't get the idea out of my head that what would I do in that situation if somebody came with me? How would I protect my children?
So, Mohammed, I think it was 2 summers ago, we had a man, mow down people on the street in North York, just north of Toronto, right? And we believe at that time it was motivated by, hate against women, right? So, misogyny. I mean, this is what came out of it at that time. We had in Cairns, we had somebody run people over, again, hundreds hurt. Hate doesn't know any borders. I wouldn't choose another country to live in other than Canada. I love this country. I believe this is one of the best countries. To me, it's maybe the best country in the world. But I'm not so naive to think that Canada doesn't have a history mired in racism and discrimination. I grew up facing discrimination, being bullied because of who I was, not being able to take my name as Muhammad and going through various names, Mike, Mikael, you name it, because I was afraid to come out of the closet and be known by my Muslimness, right, by my faith. But beyond me, this is a country that interned Japanese, right? This is a country that segregated Black people. This is a country that took children away from their families, indigenous communities, and put them in schools to teach them a different culture and religion because they thought it was better, and then put them in a mass grave. So, our hands are not so clean as a nation throughout our history. It pains me to admit it. Yeah. But if I'm going to do better, I have to figure out where is it that we're coming from and what does better look like. Yeah,
we're going to take our final break, I promise you. Mohammed Ahmoud is going to stay with us. We'll be taking more of your calls, 01924 231 083. Join us on the other side of these important messages. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. We're reflecting with Mohammed Hamoud from the city of London, Ontario, on that terrorist attack on Sunday night. The lines are still open. If you want to share your thoughts and your experiences and your reaction, and that fear I've got when I was walking my children to school this morning, thinking about what would I do if a car came towards me? How could I protect myself or my family, my children? Not worried about myself, but morely about my children. But Mohammed Hamoud is still here. Mohammed Hamoud, we were talking about just before the break. We had to stop for the break, but you were reflecting on that and how that community comes together.
I was saying that, the history of Canada is one that reflects a lot of bigotry and discrimination and racism and, Islamophobia. And Islamophobia isn't anything new. We probably just coined that term, in the past 20 years. But I'm hopeful that Canada can also work towards getting to be better, more tolerant, more accepting of other differences. And so one of your callers, when they said, I thought that Canadians were nice people, they are an incredibly, powerfully, wonderfully warm people. They are. I love Canadians. But I'm not going to think that every single person loves us. And this isn't them versus us, but when we are still othered because of the way that we dress or where we pray or how we pray, whatever your orientation, the way you love, whatever it is, the color of your skin, the language that you speak, the headdress, if people are still going to judge us and hold us accountable because of that, then we've got a lot of work to do. So the majority of Canadians, I would say, are a wonderful lot. And even some people who are incredibly warm and friendly and so forth still need to be educated because ignorance leads you into not knowing or leads you into hatred. And so our role, what we have to do as a community to move forward is to continue educating people, to bring them out of ignorance, to let them know that while we may come from many different backgrounds, we form one nation, and that's humankind.
Yeah, because hate against Muslims has kind of been normalized or ignored in some cases. There's a silence of our political leaders here in the UK. Our leader of the opposition, the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer, spoke out in Prime Minister's Questions this afternoon. But the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, didn't even respond. And lots of people on social media getting angry and saying, well, if it had been the other way around, what would the reaction be? What advice can you give to people, how they channel that anger and sadness at what's happening?
So for the past couple of days, a lot of colleagues online through LinkedIn and Facebook have been reaching out and saying, my work isn't acknowledging this. They're not sending out any sort of information, or if they are, it's localized to our, local community. And, this is where we have to speak up. This is where we say, look, we have to educate others and we have to hold people accountable that we are deserving of the same standards that other communities are when they're facing tragedies, when they face discrimination, when they're facing this sort of terrorism. So I'm a big proponent of speaking up and making sure that I can say to, a place of employment or to a group of people that you have to recognize this. You can't get past it. And this isn't a local incident. This isn't an isolated incident. God forbid that there should be more like it. But we know that there are people who still believe that Muslims are an enemy and that they don't belong here. And so we have to educate people, even those people that have those thoughts. You mentioned earlier about dialogue. We have to start from a place where we can talk to the people that don't see us as somebody that they can converse with. They see us as the other. When they get to know us, they're going to realize that we have more in common than we have different. And even our differences don't have to break us apart.
Yeah. The media has a big role as well in acceptance of Islamophobia in society. What would you say to those media editors who've allowed casual Islamophobia, anti-Muslim narrative to spread within the media, whether that's print or broadcast?
My first reaction would be to say stop, but my natural instinct would be to say, look at your hands. People are dying, and you have a responsibility. If you spread hate, if you think that it's a joke, if you think that it's art, if you think that it's cinematography, it's hate. It doesn't belong in our community, doesn't belong in our vernacular, doesn't belong in our educational materials. It doesn't belong anywhere. So I would say to those people that think that this is some sort of an art form or they're just whatever, it's online, right? It's okay. It's just a TikTok video. It doesn't, cause any hate. But you go around and you call Black people the N-word, you're going to cause trouble. You go around and you talk about, Asians brought the COVID, virus to us, you're going to cause trouble. You go around and you call Muslims terrorists, guess what? People are going to get run over while walking on the sidewalk. We have to hold these people accountable. And that's why we need legislation that does it properly. That's why, as you said earlier, how do we really redefine what terrorism looks like in Canada and elsewhere?
Yeah. And how will your city of London, Ontario recover from this dreadful terrorist attack?
Well, I'm meeting tonight with a couple of colleagues, members of parliament here in London to talk about that tonight. Feel free to join us. I don't know what the answers are, but I think yesterday that show of solidarity was a start. We invited Londoners to join us and they did. And I think what we need to do, I know what we need to do is to continue the dialogue. You don't just celebrate each other's happy moments. You cry together, you weep together, you mourn together, but you also stand together. You celebrate together. This is what families do. We are one larger family. We need to come together, continue the dialogue. And the things that tear us apart, whether they're happening locally, whether it's with your neighbor, or whether they're happening across, the pond, across the ocean, in a different part of the world. Let's have those conversations. Let's understand that it's okay to disagree, but it's not okay to let our disagreements push us into isolation, and our isolation pushes us into violence, hatred, and terrorism.
Yeah, and how do you think this terrorist attack changes the image of that liberal, open, tolerant Canada?
It adds to the image that Canada is not as open or as liberal and tolerant. It reinforces for those who don't think that this is Canada, it is Canada. For those who, think, my Canada is rosy colored and, no, it's not. Just ask any Indigenous person, just ask any Black person, ask any Muslim. Maybe ask the 9-year-old boy who doesn't have a father or a mother or a sister or a grandmother. And I think he'll tell you otherwise.
And my final question, what can you say to Muslims around the world, particularly those living in Western societies, how we can confront this hate and replace it with love, solidarity?
Well, we as a Muslim, our religion didn't come through violence. It came through peace. It came through dialogue. It came through education. It came through getting to know other cultures, right? Find what we have in common. Start that conversation. Be an ambassador of goodwill. Be a boomerang. You put out good vibes, you'll get them back. Have those conversations with your relatives, with your neighbors, with your family, with people in your community. Get involved. Don't go to your mosques and close the doors and just, right? Islam is not about prayer and solitary. Islam is about congregation. Islam is about finding what we have in common with others and becoming human bridges so that we can cross the chasms that tear us apart, that keep us on either side of the vernacular and come together to understand that we are really just one human family.
Mohammed Ahmed, thank you so much. I know it's difficult for you to come on, and especially when it affects your home city. You know the streets, you know the communities. Send our love to all the family and the communities of London, Ontario. Please keep safe and best wishes.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, my dear brother. That was Liberal Party politician Mohammed Ahmed, live from the city of London, Ontario, where the city is mourning the death of a family of 4 to an act of terrorism. That's the end of the programme. Next week, we're going to be heading to Manchester to talk to Stan. Okay, that sounds like we were talking about this week. But I really want to think about... We'll be back next Wednesday, at 8:30. But tonight, I want us to close on the London, Ontario terrorist attack with a personal reflection. Terrorism and hate is evil. A family on their daily walk never got to get home. A child will now grow up as an orphan, deprived of the love of his family. And we should not forget, This extremism hasn't come from nowhere. For years now, demonizing Islam and Muslims has become fashionable and acceptable in our politics, in our media, and in wider society. Whenever here in the UK, our political leaders, not a single political leader could utter a single word of solidarity for Muslims until this afternoon, where Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, addressed that. We know that their actions and words have helped create this hostile environment for Muslims. I'm just so pained that Muslim lives aren't held in the same way. Surely we can agree that all human life is sacred, whatever its faith or background. We want people to show the same level of compassion as I believe Muslims' lives do matter. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates the rank of the deceased and gives strength to that 9-year-old boy who's in hospital and not having the love of his family no more. He'll have a wider family. He'll have uncles and aunts who will be able to try to help him recover and rebuild his life. But he won't have the live of his family. As I said, terrorism is evil, and the only way to defeat it is to stand together. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight. I want to say a real big thank you to you. But as we finish reflecting on the events in London, Ontario, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be arriving here in the UK for the G7 summit tomorrow. But our first arrival of the international leaders has happened tonight. Joe Biden, the US president, has arrived in the UK on his first official visit internationally. He's here for the G7 summit. He's currently meeting US personnel, military personnel at the Milden Hall in Suffolk, which is RF Milden Hall. And then he'll head, I understand, towards Cornwall, where he'll rest for the evening. And then tomorrow, he'll have his first bilateral meeting with an international leader away from the United States. He'll be meeting with our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to talk about various issues. Thank you so much to the colleagues behind the scene who make it possible to make this programme what it is. To you at home, thank you for your love and support. Please spare a moment to reflect and pray for the victims of the London, Ontario terrorist attack. Thank you so much. Keep safe and yourself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.